Bleeding purple and gold. From the heart of Los Angeles, this is the LakersNation.com podcast with your host, Trevor Lane.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's show. As always, we are powered by CLNS Media and LakersNation.com. Well, the NBA Finals are in full swing, and for the Lakers, that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, even though there are a few former Lakers playing in the Finals. Right now, the Lakers are getting ready for the NBA Draft, which is coming up on June 21st, and free agency, which begins at midnight on July 1st. So in order to break down all the stuff that's still going on in the world of the Los Angeles Lakers, brought in Alex Kennedy of HoopsHype, good friend of the show. Alex, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Alex, these NBA Finals are going on right now, and Lakers fans are certainly watching the Finals, paying attention to them, but a lot of people are keeping an eye on LeBron James. Will the outcome of this year's NBA Finals make a big impact on where he winds up going in free agency in July?
It's possible. I mean, certainly if they win the championship, then that changes everything. But I think most of us agree that that's not going to happen. That, this Golden State Warriors team is just so much better than Cleveland. But it really depends, how Cleveland loses. If they're blown out and swept in 4 games and, LeBron has another performance like he does in game 1 where he's putting up, 51 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. If he carries the team like that throughout the entire series and they still, don't win a game, or even if they just, win 1 game, he's going to be frustrated. And you look at this Cavs team, they don't really have a lot of avenues to improve that roster. They've already, given big contracts to certain players that have, made their cap sheet somewhat difficult to work around. Obviously, they can still make trades, but, they really went in all, they went all in at the trade deadline with their assets, and that didn't really work out too well for them. So I think if you're a Laker fan, you're really rooting for the Cavaliers to get blown out in embarrassing fashion, for LeBron to get zero help, and basically just be looking at this Cavs team and saying, I don't want to be back here. There's nothing we can do. I can't compete for a championship with this core around me. So I think that's kind of what Laker fans should be rooting for if you're watching the finals. But I do think that it could have an impact. You look at this offseason, there are so few teams that have cap space to and there's not really one destination you could point to and say, oh, that's the obvious destination for LeBron. Houston has been mentioned, but their cap situation, they're going to have to do a whole lot and gut that team almost to be able to bring in LeBron James and keep, important pieces like James Harden, Chris Paul, Clint Capella. It's hard to imagine how they can do that. So it really comes down to the young teams like Philly and LA. And I can't see him going to somewhere like Dallas or Atlanta just because they're rebuilding. So because there's so few options out there, because Cleveland is struggling so much, I think that's where, if you're a Laker fan, you do have some hope, and it's not a pipe dream.
Now, as we speak here, the Warriors right now, it's game 2 is happening as we're recording this, and the Warriors are up 12 in the second quarter. There's about 3 minutes left, and they look like they're kind of on cruise control. This looks like a very good team. So far, so good. I mean, I thought that LeBron pretty much threw his best punch at Golden State in game 1, and then, of course, the J.R. Smith incident and all that, and it didn't go the Cavs' way. And now they're really in for a tough series the rest of the way because he needs these other guys to step up. There's been a few moments in these playoffs where I feel like we've seen LeBron, just body language-wise, it feels like he's looking around and kind of going, man, this team just doesn't have it. And if that happens, if that's the case, that's what's going through his head right now, you have to think he's probably going to leave the Cavs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at his comments throughout this season, the body language, the frustration with Dan Gilbert, there's a lot of things that point to him leaving the Cavaliers. And it just becomes, the question is, where does he go? Is it the Lakers? Is it the Sixers? People have mentioned them because, they have a promising young core. He'd be able to stay in the Eastern Conference. At this point, I would say he's more likely than not to leave the Cavaliers. You do have to factor in, the fact that it's home for him, that he has said he wants to live there after he retires, and wants to be able to raise his kids there, things like that. I think those things have to be factored in a little bit, but then at the same time, he does have the house in Los Angeles. His businesses are based there. There's a lot of factors that point to LA as well. So, but yeah, I mean, going back to what you were saying, I think his body language, his comments, his just overall frustration with the team, and then also ownership and the front office. We're now hearing more and more stories about, he's frustrated they didn't trade for Paul George, frustrated they didn't make this move or that move, frustrated that they got rid of David Griffin. You go down the list of things that he has been upset about. It almost reminds me of whenever he left Miami, and there was this, long list of things that, he wanted done differently, whether it was keeping Mike Miller instead of, amnestying him, paying more money, getting his input with certain moves. Certain players were let go that upset him. I think I could see him leaving this summer for similar reasons. I feel like LeBron kind of gets fed up and gets it in his mind that he's going to do something and go somewhere else. And, there definitely are some similarities to that summer, before he left Miami to now.
Certainly. And you know what? He's going to have his options out there. He's going to have a lot of different places that he could go to. I mean, I'm certain, every team in the league would love to have LeBron James on their team. But at this point, there's not that many realistic options. We mentioned Houston, of course, the 76ers, the Lakers, and the Cavaliers. Those seem to be the big four that most teams are talking about. If you were to take a guess at this point, I know it's all speculation because nobody knows for sure what LeBron is doing. LeBron may not even know what LeBron is doing right now at this stage. He's busy with the NBA Finals. But if you were to take a guess, July 4th, 5th, 6th, whenever he makes his decision, which team is he going to?
See, this is really hard because I don't think he goes to the Lakers if he goes alone. I think that their young core is too far away. Yeah, their young core is too far away from contention, and obviously with LeBron, he wants to compete for a championship every single year. So I think if he can, add another star with him to go to the Lakers, whether that's Paul George, whether that's a trade for Kawhi Leonard, go through the list. If he's able to get another star to come with him to LA, I think that becomes feasible. Or if, he is just confident that they can add a star sooner than later, even if it's not this summer. We saw the whole thing with the Cavaliers and Kevin Love. He went there before they had Kevin Love. Andrew Wiggins was obviously on the roster, and then he knew, Kevin Love would be coming shortly after.
Right.
So, if there's something like that in place where he goes there and then he has some kind of idea that a star is going to come pretty soon, I could see LA being the destination, especially just because he has the businesses there. I think he likes the idea of being in that market and taking advantage of everything that comes with being in LA. Magic Johnson is someone that he has said, he idolizes from a business standpoint. He wants to be, a billionaire. We've heard a whole lot of things that suggest LA makes sense. But from a basketball standpoint, I think he needs another star to go there because I don't look at this Lakers team and think, adding LeBron is enough to make them a contender. I think they need more help than that. So, I mean, if it's purely basketball and, there aren't off-court business-type decisions factored in, then I think, Houston is probably the place that jumps out at me. Just he's best friend with Chris Paul. James Harden is obviously a phenomenal player, probably the MVP this year. Clint Capella is only going to keep getting better. But again, how does that work cap-wise? LeBron James has made it very clear he's done taking discounts. He's not going to sign for anything less than the max. Now, I do believe Daryl Morey has some kind of plan in place. Daryl Morey is one of the best GMs in the NBA. No one thought this time last year he'd end up with Chris Paul. So he's very good at surprising us and putting together these plans where he can add a star and build a super team. So I don't put it past the Rockets. I think they're probably my favorite at this point. So I would say the Rockets right now, but that team would look very different next year. People are picturing that Rockets team and thinking, oh, they're going to have Eric Gordon and Clint Capella and, go down the list. But that's a very different looking team if they do land LeBron. And the Sixers, too, they stand out, too. But we just haven't heard enough from LeBron's side or the Sixers side to think that that's really going to happen or they're high on his list. So right now, I would say Houston is probably my number one. And then the Lakers, if he can land, another star to go with him, is number two.
Agree 100% with you right there. I've been saying for a while now that I think Houston's going to be the destination. Of course, you know what? I couldn't predict that he was going to Miami. I remember back then I thought he was going to New York, and that didn't end up happening. He ends up going to Miami. I didn't see him going back to Cleveland, so I don't know if I can't say we'll be right on this one, but it feels like that would make a lot of sense for him. Now, Alex, at this stage, this is kind of, it's strange with the Lakers not being in the playoffs, but this is getting into kind of the fun part of the basketball season for me, which is kind of weird because the team isn't even playing, but just covering the team. We're getting into the draft and we're getting into free agency, which is like the two most exciting times for the Lakers right now, because this is when we're going to really see the team be formed. Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka can really put their fingerprints on this organization. So let's talk a little bit about the draft. All right. I know you've been following this draft quite a bit. What are your thoughts? There are a lot of people who say, oh, this draft is a deep draft or it's top heavy or whatever. What do you see overall from this draft? Our NBA draft segment of the show is brought to you by Sumo Jerky. Head over to sumojerky.com. You can sign up to get some of the world's best jerky delivered straight to your door. How it works is they scour the globe, the good folks at Sumo Jerky do, and they find the best beef jerky around, including rare brands and small batch jerky. So this isn't the kind of jerky that you're necessarily going to find in your grocery store. They're going to find special stuff just for you. They try all the different kinds of jerkies. They review all the ingredients and make sure that everything is top quality and meets Sumo Jerky standards. They ship the best of the best to your door every single month. You can enjoy it yourself. You can give it to a friend as a gift. It is amazing stuff. And again, the best part is they send it straight to your door. You don't even have to go to the grocery store for it or anything else. So again, check them out, guys. Very, very worth it. Go to sumojerky.com and get a delicious treat.
I like this draft. I do think it is pretty deep. There are some guys in this draft, especially big men, that you can get pretty far down in the first round that I think in most drafts would go a bit higher. When you look at the top 10, for example, you have guys like DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley, Jaren Jackson Jr., Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter. There's so many guys that are right there in that top 10 that, guys like Robert Williams. There are a lot of guys that are falling down a bit and can be had in the middle of the first round or late first round that I think most years would probably be considered, possible lottery guys. And I think this is a deep draft. There's a lot of guys that have potential that you could get later in the first round. I'm looking at a mock draft right now from Aaron Smith, who does our mock at HoopsHype. And, he has a guy who I love, Lonnie Walker. He's someone that has a ton of potential. I think his game fits the NBA style so much better than it did college. He's a guy that showed, glimpses when he was healthy. Could be a very good player at the next level. He has him going 20 right now, and that's just crazy to me. A guy like Troy Brown, who did really well at Oregon as a freshman, a 6'7" combo guard, he has him going 23. I mean, there are players in this draft that you can find at the end of the first round that are very talented. And then you and I were talking about this before, we jumped on the air, but Mitchell Robinson is a guy that has tons of potential. We didn't get to see him this year, in college, but he's a guy that is 7'1", 7'4" wingspan. He was great in high school, and unfortunately we didn't get to see him this year. But pretty much every mock draft has the Lakers linked to Mitchell Robinson, and he's another guy that I think in a lot of draft classes we'd be seeing him go higher up. I think of other guys that were big men that were unable to play their 1 year of college. typically they're kind of the mystery man, but teams fall in love with them. A guy like Enes Kanter, for example, goes way higher just because he has the size, he has the wingspan, he has the potential. We've seen it happen a few times where a guy's ineligible, but teams just fall in love based on their physical frame and the workouts, those things alone. What do you make of the whole Mitchell Robinson thing? Because I think it's strange that so many mock drafts have him linked to the Lakers, and it tells me one of two things. I think either the Lakers love this guy and they have a really bad problem with leaks in their front office, or it's just a lot of draft analysts thinking, okay, the Lakers need a big man. He makes sense there. He's the best guy in that, range for the Lakers. So they're pegging him there. What do you think of this?
Well, yeah, I had Corey Hansford from Lakers Nation was on a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this whole situation and how it's strange because you're right. The Lakers haven't really had a big leak problem in the past. They've been pretty good about keeping things quiet. Usually people don't know who they're drafting. I mean, I remember during the Mitch Kupchak era, even Adrian Wojnarowski didn't know who they were picking, and he's like famous for spoiling draft picks, for tweeting them out before the commissioner even announces them. So they've historically done pretty well about keeping things quiet. I mean, they've managed to get their targets late in the draft, guys like Kyle Kuzma and Josh Hart and Larry Nance Jr. and so on and so on. So it's a weird situation. All these rumors, it kind of reminds me of scenarios, and I wish I could think of one off the top of my head, but scenarios where a guy just kind of has their name smushed in with the Lakers in order to get that attention. If you put any guy's name in the same sentence as the Lakers, it's going to blow up a lot more than if, say, you link them to like the Grizzlies or a team like that.
Yeah.
So you got to wonder if that's a factor.
That happens all the time in free agency, especially. We see that all the time. And that is a good point because especially a guy like Mitchell Robinson, who didn't play college this year, who needs that attention boost. And if everyone's saying, Mitchell Robinson could be a Laker, then all of a sudden, we're talking about him. People are, pulling up his film. He's getting way more attention than if, he was being linked to, what's another team in that range? Indiana at 23,
sure, right.
Or Portland at 24. It definitely benefits him to be linked to the Lakers. So that makes me wonder, is it his camp that is leaking this? Saying, he'd be a great fit in the Lakers and they really like him. That's always a possibility as well. Agents leak things around this time of year too. So maybe it's not a front office leak. Maybe it's an agent leak. Or maybe it's a manufactured thing from, his camp. We don't know. That's the point. We don't really know. But yeah, you're right. There has definitely been times where teams or players or agents will throw the Lakers in the mix. Oh, the Lakers called and they're interested in him in free agency, or the Lakers are working us out, and that's always kind of used to give the guy more media attention, get fans excited. It definitely is used because the Lakers, they generate clicks, they generate interest, they generate buzz.
Yeah, absolutely, and that could be what's going on here. But at the same time, we don't want to discount the fact that he is still a quality player. I mean, we talked about Mo Bamba and DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley and all these other guys. Well, coming out of high school, Mitchell Robinson, he was in the same breath as a lot of these players, right? I mean, he was in that group of bigs that everybody said is this next wave. So he is a talented player. We've seen footage of him stepping out and shooting threes. We know he can block shots. He can get up above the rim and really dunk the ball, which would be exciting to see in transition with Lonzo Ball running with him. But I don't think we can say for sure the Lakers are locked in on this guy by any means. I mean, because we don't know where this is coming from. And historically, if things are still as tight of a ship as they have been in the past, I'd lean towards it not coming from the Lakers. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a motivation for somebody to put this information out there, and exactly what that motivation is, we don't know just yet. But maybe we'll find out on draft night.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, it does make sense, as you said. You look at, the Lakers depth chart. Brook Lopez is a free agent. The guys that they have, for their future are Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Kyle Kuzma. I think we can assume Julius Randle will be back unless, they're able to get multiple stars. So you kind of look at those positions and say, okay, they have their guy of the future. Center is one of those positions where you have to wonder if a guy like Robinson's there, do they go and pull the trigger on him? So I understand it. I get why people are linking him to the Lakers, especially if they're hearing something from the agent or they did hear something, from the Lakers. We don't know where it's coming from, but it does make sense, as you're saying.
Yeah, and the rumor was the Lakers had told him to shut down his workout because they promised him to pick him at 25, and that was a couple of weeks ago, I believe, that came out, which made no sense because, for the Lakers to tell somebody to shut down their workout process at this point, and then for that information to get leaked, I mean, they're still doing their homework. They're still figuring everything out. That would be very, very premature of them to do.
Yeah, it was so early. I'm glad you brought that up. That doesn't happen that early in the process. It really doesn't. I mean, it would just be crazy for for a team to do that this early in the process. And honestly, I want to add this too. Just because a team makes a promise to a guy doesn't mean they're going to go there or be on the board whenever that pick comes. There have been plenty of times where a team has made a promise to a guy, and then that guy ends up going 10 picks higher. Whenever a guy shuts down their workouts or leaves the combine or stops visiting teams because they have a promise, typically what ends up happening is it almost helps that player's stock more than hurts it. I look at Dion Waiters, and he's the best example of this. He left the combine. He stopped doing workouts, and he had a promise in the teens. I think it was from Phoenix, if I remember correctly. And then obviously, he ends up going number 4 to Cleveland. He went way higher than anyone expected. And basically what happened was he had a promise. Every other team sat down and said, man, he has a promise. What are we missing out on? And they all started looking back at his film, and all these teams became enamored with him and really fell in love with his game, even though he wasn't working out for them, even though they didn't get a chance to see him in their facility. So sometimes a promise can actually, help a guy's stock, and they're not even there on the board whenever the team that makes the promise is picking.
Right, absolutely. And that's exactly what could be going on here, where, walking out of your workouts and shutting down makes it seem like some team has promised you attach your name to the Lakers, you're going to get a lot of attention, and next thing you know, you're getting picked 15th or something like that instead of getting taken at the end of the first round. And that could be what's happening here. Could be a little bit of manipulation on that side. Let's talk a little LiAngelo Ball. I know you've been around the Ball family a bit. Everything I'm hearing is that this guy is not going to get drafted, yet we know he worked out with the Lakers. What are you hearing about him?
I would be surprised if he got drafted. Basically, I was down at the Pro Basketball Combine in Bradenton, Florida, at the IMG Academy, and there was 24 prospects there. LiAngelo competed in the second day, which was with some of the better prospects that were in attendance, and he did a pretty good job. He put up some quiet points. He made some nice hustle plays, but on the floor, he didn't look like he belonged on the same court as certain players like Dikembe Dixon or Rodney Bullock. They were guys that, I could see getting two-way contracts next year and really being effective. And LiAngelo, he's 6'5". He tries to post up way too often for someone that height. If he were to play at the next level, he's not going to be able to do that. Before the combine, he was saying that, he really wanted to showcase his jump shot, and his jumper, it wasn't bad. There were times where he got hot during workouts and, knocked down, 13 to 14 shots, but there were also times where his jumper went cold, and it just, for someone his size and his inconsistent shot, the fact that he relies on that post-up game so much, I just can't see him being drafted. And I do think I tried to write this in my article for HoopsHype when, I basically wrote an article behind the scenes with the Ball family for 48 hours. In his first scrimmage, his team was getting blown out. And a lot of his points and numbers actually came, was already decided, and the main battle in that game was between Dixon and Bullock, the guys I just mentioned. They were really going at it, and then LiAngelo kind of padded his stats a little bit. The second scrimmage he was in, the final scrimmage he was in, the guy that he was going to be going up against, I think his name is LeGerald Vicks from Kansas. He actually injured his knee, and he was one of the best players at the combine. He didn't play in that game, so what they did was they got a staffer from the pro basketball combine who's now a G League coach to sub in and play 3-on-3. And the guy had played college basketball for 4 years at Stony Brook. He averaged like 1 point per game. But basically my point is, for most of that second scrimmage, LiAngelo had a pro basketball combine staffer, a G League coach guarding him, who's like 5'10", 5'11". So people saw his numbers in that second scrimmage, and it wasn't against a fellow draft prospect. For most of that scrimmage, he was being guarded by someone that was on the court just to make sure they could have 3-on-3. So it was really hard to take away, a lot from that scrimmage. And, there's just been a lot of things coming out from that camp. At one point they were trying to exaggerate his vertical leap. He had told me he was working out for the Warriors. The Warriors turn around and reject it or deny it, saying there's no workout scheduled. And then his camp says, oh, it's because we agreed to a workout. We just haven't agreed to a date. There's just a whole lot going on there. So I don't think he gets drafted. I'll say that. There have been people who say that he won't be in the G League next year. I disagree with that. I think he will be in the G League next year. I think there is some kind of agreement where the Lakers would put him on the G League roster. When I talked to LaVar Ball, he made it sound like that was, the floor. That the Lakers would at least agree to put him on the G League roster, maybe as a favor to Lonzo. I don't really know. That's how LaVar made it sound. But even if the Lakers didn't, I could see another team putting him on the G League roster just for the, promo marketing standpoint of things. Being on the reality show, getting the attention that comes to having LiAngelo Ball. All these G League teams are trying to get attention and sell tickets. It's why they do all these crazy promo nights, wear the crazy jerseys. And we've seen that happen before where guys have been signed more for their marketing and visibility than their talent. So I do think he ends up in the G League or overseas, but I would be very, very, very surprised if he ended up in the NBA.
Sure. I mean, that's was part of the appeal for that Lithuanian team, was that he would bring that kind of attention and his brother would bring that kind of attention. So you think maybe there's a kind of a wink-wink deal where the Lakers will add him, maybe they add him to the Summer League team, and then from there he goes to the G League or something like that.
Well, that's the way LaVar Ball made it sound. When I interviewed LaVar, and he basically said, look, if another team looks at LiAngelo and says, we really like what we see, we like his game, we want to draft him, we see a significant role for him, I'm not just going to say, no, we want to go to the Lakers and be on the G League team. I'm going to let him go to that team. So he made it sound like that was already something that was kind of in the works, kind of like you said, like, a wink-wink kind of agreement. He made it sound like, it's a decision between should we go to that team or should we go play for the Lakers G League team like we've already discussed. That's kind of the way he made it sound. I could be wrong there. Maybe that's just his hope. You never really know with LaVar.
Right.
When I was interviewing him, it's funny, you ask him a question and he just goes and really answers whatever question he wants.
Yes.
He takes the conversation wherever he wants to go. I asked him, for example, at one point, what are your expectations for Lonzo Ball in year 2? And he said, I hope he's twice as good, and then proceeded to go on a 5-minute rant about how Gunnar Peterson, the head trainer for the Lakers, is to blame for all of Lonzo's injuries, and Lonzo was never hurt before. He got to the Lakers, and Gunnar Peterson doesn't know what he's doing and has hurt all these different guys, and it was just crazy. So you never know what you're gonna get from LaVar. I don't know how credible that is, but I will say, in talking to LaVar, it made it sound like there was already some kind of G League type agreement between Jello and the Lakers.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, LiAngelo has been much maligned. There are a lot of people who think that he is just flat out not an NBA player. He's not going to be at that level. Lonzo obviously is, and there are some who say that LaMelo is. So from the Lakers' perspective, might it be wise to kind of keep the Ball family happy in terms of LiAngelo, and then that might mean stashing him with the South Bay Lakers so that when it comes time, then you've already got that in, and then the Ball family has that much more motivation to funnel LaMelo to Los Angeles. Could that be part of the plan here?
Well, I don't really know. I'm not sure about LaMelo in terms of his NBA talent. I've heard some people say that. I know at one point he was being talked about as a top prospect, but he's also really inefficient. I'm not sure about his NBA prospects, but I do think there is something to be said for keeping Lonzo happy. If putting Jello in the G League is going to keep Lonzo happy, that could be worth it. And one thing that LaVar did say, and he said this before, is that Lonzo would be willing to take a significant discount on his next NBA contract if and he kind of made it sound like if the Lakers do right by him, and maybe that does mean putting Jello on the D League team, trying to go after LaMelo whenever that time comes, that could be worth it. If putting Jello on your G League team ends up with Lonzo taking this big discount to put stars around him, then yeah, that's worth it. That's great for the Lakers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what LaVar basically said. He the way he told it to me was, Lonzo's willing to play for pennies because he wants stars around him. So if that's the case, then yeah, you do want to keep Lonzo happy. But I do think there is some fear that if you put Jello on the G League team, let's say you get LaMelo on on the Lakers roster, how much control do you really want to give the Ball family?
Right.
We're talking, LaVar is obviously someone that is so hot and cold. He can praise his sons 1 second, but the next second, he's trashing Luke Walton and trashing the head trainer of the Lakers and questioning, teammates and things like that. There's a lot of risk there too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be something that Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka are going to have to navigate very, very carefully. Now let's wrap up our draft talk here. Looking at the mock drafts, let's focus on that 25th pick. Is there anybody that you think that is in the Lakers draft range? Obviously, hey, it'd be great if they got Ayton, right? That'd be fantastic, or Bagley, or Doncic, or any of those guys. But obviously, that's not realistic. So, of the guys that are realistically going to be there or may be there for the Lakers to select at 25, is there one guy that you feel is just a perfect fit for the team, or a guy that you hope to see wind up with the Lakers?
Yeah, there are a few guys I'm really interested in. I think obviously if a guy like Lonnie Walker slips, he would be great. I already mentioned how much I like him. If KCP isn't back next year, I could see them going after someone like Gary Trent Jr. There's a guy, Landry Shamet. He played at Wichita State. Great three-point shooter. I think he's one of those guys that is really going to help himself in workouts because he just shoots the ball so well, and I could see a team falling in love with him, during a workout because he's so gifted offensively and fits today's NBA so well with that jump shot. And then another guy I like is Chandler Hutchinson. He's 6'7", from Boise State. He's more of a win now guy. He's a senior, so he had a lot of college experience, but he could play shooting guard or small forward. I think he could be really interesting. I'm looking at more wing type guys because again, you get to that 20 to 30 range. There really aren't a whole lot of centers that are projected to go there except for Mitchell Robinson, and maybe that's another reason why he's being pegged there. because mock drafters want to find a center for the Lakers, and he's the convenient fit. The goal for the Lakers obviously is to have one of these guys that should go much higher, slip to them, whether it be a Robert Williams, a Zaire Smith. I could even see a guy like Keisha Bates Diop fall to them. He's someone that I like a lot. DeAnthony Melton. One of those guys, if they slip, they could definitely be a steal. But I'm looking more at guys that could play the 2, the 3 for the Lakers.
Agreed. Yeah, those are the main guys that I've been looking at as well. I'd also throw Kevin Huerter's name into the mix there. There have been some interesting guys that they'll have to look at, and I think they're in a great spot at 25 where they can grab somebody who does slip in the draft. And of course, the Lakers have historically not had a problem with drafting older players, guys who are sort of being dinged because they stayed in college a little bit longer. I'm thinking of Josh Hart and Larry Nance Jr. and of course Kyle Kuzma. The Lakers have no problem picking up guys like that and still believe that they have plenty of room to grow. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of options for them. Now, heading out of the NBA draft, just a week and a half later, free agency is going to start. And that's when Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka are really going to have to prove their worth because the Lakers are going to have more cap room than any team in the league. We know they're going to be chasing LeBron. We know they're going to be chasing Paul George. But they also have a number of players that were on their team last year that are now free agents. You already mentioned KCP. You also have Brook Lopez. You have Isaiah Thomas. Those are kind of the big three. What do you see happening with those guys? I mean, a lot of people kind of see them as a fallback option for the Lakers, but I mean, where may they wind up?
Yeah, that's kind of the way I see it, especially the unrestricted guys, the guys like Brook Lopez and KCP and Isaiah Thomas. It really kind of depends what happens with their other free agency plans. I would keep Julius Randle. I think you can. I'm not sure there's a team out there that's going to give him a huge contract offer. So I would keep him.
The Lakers are hoping there's not. That's for sure.
Yeah. But we actually are doing a series right now on HoopsHype where one of my colleagues, Frank Urbina, he's doing a fantastic job. He looks at every free agent and he breaks down the 4 most realistic destinations for each free agent player, and he's actually done one for all 4 Lakers you mentioned: KCP, IT, Brook Lopez, and Julius Randle. And for KCP, he mentioned the San Antonio Spurs being a possibility, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Memphis Grizzlies. So he actually, and then obviously the Lakers re-signing. And then for a guy like Brook Lopez, he threw out the Portland Trailblazers if they lose Yusuf Nurkic. He threw out the Milwaukee Bucks. He threw out the Brooklyn Nets. Possible return there. Mainly the Nets are getting mentioned in some of these articles just because they have cap space. And he's trying to do it realistically. He's not going to teams that have no space at all. Mm-hmm. And I think the really interesting one is Isaiah Thomas, just because this is a guy that was supposed to get a max contract a year ago, and I feel horrible for the guy. Nothing but positive interaction with Isaiah throughout his entire career. I've always kind of rooted for him as an underdog, and then the timing of his injury, the trades, it all just really sucked for him because now we're talking about him, getting a significantly smaller deal. So my thing with him, I wonder, does he sign a 1-year deal somewhere and try to, just play really well and test free agency again next summer to raise his stock and try to get a bigger deal? Because I think one thing he doesn't want to do is lock himself into a long-term contract that isn't very good. He did that with the Phoenix Suns last time he was a free agent, and obviously he got traded to Boston and played really well, but he regretted signing that Phoenix Suns deal because it was not for very much money. Initially in Phoenix, he was coming off the bench behind Bledsoe and Dragic. I think it makes more sense for him to maybe sign a 1-year deal, try to perform out of his mind, and then hit free agency again. So we'll see what he does. I could see him even going to a team that's not in contention. Does he go to a team like the Knicks or one of those teams where he can get big minutes and put up big numbers to try to help his stock and they get paid the next summer, that's a possibility. So I'm very curious to see what happens. Like I said, with Julius Randle, I would keep him. But yeah, the Lakers have a lot of really interesting free agents this summer.
Absolutely. And with IT, I mean, a lot of people forget because they grew frustrated with him this season. But, I mean, a year ago, this guy was an MVP candidate. I think he came in 5th in MVP voting a year ago. I mean, that's a serious player there. And obviously things didn't work out for him this season. He had his struggles and everything, but he apparently is thinking that he's going to finally be fully healthy next season. If he does sign a 1-year contract, it's going to be that kind of prove it type deal. I could see him coming back to the Lakers. I could see him going elsewhere as well. But, you look around the league and you can't really find all that many, maybe New York, like you mentioned, but all that many situations where that IT would have a starting spot and would be getting plenty of minutes. That's a challenge, finding that type of destination for him. So I almost wonder if he's going to wind up back with the Lakers, partially because of that and partially because of his history with the franchise growing up and being a Lakers fan and all those things.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, that's kind of what happened, in terms of him not being able to find a starting point guard job and, having so much competition around the league. That's what happened last time he was a free agent. When he landed with the Suns, he thought he was a starting point guard. He had put up really good numbers with Sacramento, but, other GMs thought, he's putting up, big numbers on a losing team. It's not going to translate. So he ends up signing with Phoenix, and it didn't work out, obviously. But the main reason he went to Phoenix and was able to find a starting job is because you look around the NBA and there's just so many star point guards or teams that have their point guard of the future that they're committed to and developing. So if you're a point guard that's hitting free agency, it's just so difficult. And the one thing that Isaiah's camp always really stressed in the past was, yeah, he's small, but he's really durable. He hasn't had an injury. That was one thing they kept saying over and over again, whether it was when he was approaching free agency and signed with Phoenix, whether it was when he was talking about, the Brinks truck and all that with Boston. Now he's had multiple injuries, and that's really concerning if you're a team that's, trying to sign him, especially to a multi-year deal. So that's where I think he has to go prove again, that he's durable. Not only, prove that he can put up those kind of big numbers again and produce the same way, but prove that he's durable and he, can stay healthy for a full season. So yeah, maybe he does return to the Lakers. That's very possible. Maybe he does have to transition at this point in his career to, more of a sixth man role. We've seen that from, his close friend Jamal Crawford and, other guys that he is close with, guys like Jason Terry. Maybe that's the role he ends up taking. But his free agency is going to be very interesting. His injuries and the timing of everything is just so unfortunate, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a matter of him buying into that six-man role, and that's not an easy thing for guys to do sometimes when they've been used to being starters. But maybe that's what he's got to do in order to get his value back up a bit, and then he'll hit free agency in 2019 if he just takes a 1-year deal. Well, you know what? I mean, this whole time period that we're about to enter into here, the draft coming up in just over 2 weeks, and then free agency, and then summer league starts. I mean, it's going to be an exciting time for Lakers fans, and you've got, basically July. I'm pretty much not going to be sleeping because we've got free agency starting up, and then right after that is summer league. We'll be in Las Vegas to check that out. And it's going to be a really cool time where we're going to see this new Lakers team come together. Alex, man, thanks so much for coming on here and giving us all your insight and all these great stories. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is my favorite time of the year, too. I love the draft, love free agency, so let's do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, make sure you go check out Alex's work over at hoopshype.com. Always great stuff. That's going to wrap things up for today. We'll be back next Monday with a new show as we get closer to the NBA draft. My name is Trevor Lane, and this has been the Lakers Nation podcast. See ya.